How's it going, guys? Aaron from PhoneDog.com here, and whether you're on Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, or Sprint, you have a lot of different Android options available to you. You know, you have high-end phones, mid-range phones, low-end phones, and all in between. A lot of different Android choices, but you know what we do in PhoneDog land when there are two awesome phones and we want to compare those and see which one's the best? We do a dogfight. That's what. In today's dogfight, we have the T-Mobile myTouch 4G Slide, the newest member of the myTouch family, and a new Android phone on T-Mobile. 1.2 gigahertz processor over here that's dual-core at that, an 8-megapixel camera, and Android 2.3. Then over here, we have the HTC EVO 3D, 1.2 gigahertz dual-core processor here as well. Dual 5-megapixel cameras on the back, so you can shoot 3D content, and Android 2.3 over here on this bad boy also. Which one's the best? Should you go with the myTouch line with the physical keyboard, or should you go with the EVO 3D, the successor to the EVO 4G on Sprint? We'll find out that more in the dogfight, but first, special thanks to our buddies at Best Buy. They always hook us up with awesome phones, and we give them to you in our contests. So when you walk into Best Buy Mobile, you'll walk out working. They'll help you set up either of these devices, get your email set up, your web set up, all that stuff. So when you walk out that door, you're working and you don't have to worry about anything at Best Buy Mobile. Enough of that, let's get into it. Which one's the winner? T-Mobile myTouch 4G Slide with that physical QWERTY keyboard, or HTC EVO 3D with awesome 3D content? We'll find it out in the dogfight, which starts right now. You'll notice a lot of similarities with both of these devices because not only are they both made by HTC, but they're also very similar in the software department and in a lot of ways in the hardware department. Here they are, T-Mobile myTouch 4G Slide, the newest member of the myTouch family, newest Android device at that, coming to T-Mobile on the 27th for $199.99 after a $50 mail-in rebate. Now, it's been available for a couple of days through an online pre-order, but you can get it in your hands on the same day on the 27th. Then you have the HTC EVO 3D. Came out a few weeks back. It's an awesome device. It's a successor to the EVO 4G in a lot of ways, and it adds 3D content. So, you know, for people that are interested in 3D, even though that ecosystem hasn't quite evolved in the mobile space, you can take advantage of it on the HTC EVO 3D. Now, specs-wise, very similar in a lot of ways. 1.2 gigahertz dual-core Snapdragon processors in both of these devices, but you'll see some differences in things like the software, screens rather. 3.7-inch Super LCD display over here, 4.3-inch QHD display. So not only different in terms of screen technology, but also different in terms of resolution as well. On the back of this one, you get an 8-megapixel camera. 8-megapixel camera with dual LED flash, and this is something T-Mobile's touting, both T-Mobile and HTC are touting as the most advanced camera on any smartphone. You know, almost zero shutter time, a lot of advanced features in this, which we'll cover a little later in the video. 3.5mm headphone jack up here, power button, a digital or a physical camera button as well. You know how much I love those. Micro USB charging port, volume rocker, and of course some physical buttons down here at the bottom along with an optical trackpad. So you can see it kind of preserves that existing myTouch image. Looks very similar actually to the myTouch 4G, where you'll see the difference is you pop that open and you have a full QWERTY keyboard. 4-row QWERTY keyboard with a dedicated row for spacebar and the associated symbols, things like Genius button, symbol, alt, home, menu, things like that, things you would find up here on the Android hotkeys, if you will. So it's running Android 2.3 and it's running what's called an espresso build of Sense 3.0. So the espresso build is something that's custom to the myTouch line. We've seen it in several myTouch devices in the past, and you'll see some little differences. You know, this is running Sense 3.0 as well atop Android 2.3, and you'll see some differences like this, for example, the ability to have shortcuts at the bottom on the lock screen and to have cool things like the weather displaying as well. You do not get that functionality on the myTouch 4G Slide. It's kind of a stripped down version, if you will. You know, it's a little bit different from myTouch, but still I would consider it to be stripped down. So you don't get that on the myTouch 4G Slide. You do get that on the EVO 3D, and I'll show you. You can click the wheel, or click the ring rather, to scroll up and unlock it. Now it does have the carousel effect, just like all Sense 3.0 devices. Where it's different though, it comes with 5 home screens instead of 7 home screens. So you'll see some changes like that, and you'll see that it's kind of a watered down version of the full Sense 3.0 experience that we've seen on the Sensation 4G, the EVO 3D, and things like that. And actually I wanted to point this out because I had to return the Sensation 4G to T-Mobile PR. So if you're wondering, you know, a lot of people tweeted me, said things like, well, wouldn't this be a better comparison between the Sensation 4G? Absolutely, because they're both on T-Mobile, but I don't have a Sensation 4G on me at the moment. So the EVO 3D is the next closest, at least in the specs department. They're very, very similar, with the exception of 3D, of course, and some design differences. Those are the biggest differences between the EVO and the Sensation. And memory differences, of course. But you can see here, you know, like I said, very similar design to the past myTouch 4G. Very similar there. It retains the optical trackpad. And then you have the EVO 3D over here. Successor to the EVO 4G, like I said, toting a dual-core processor as well. Dual 5-megapixel cameras on the back. so you can shoot 3D content. Both of these shoot video at 720p, so you get 720p video in 2D and in 3D. So no 1080p like they originally said. The press release was incorrect, but you know, for a lot of people, I think 720p will be just fine. Capacitive buttons down there. Android 2.3, like I said, with Sense 3.0, and that's a little bit of a bigger device. Over here, you'll see a physical camera button with the option to toggle back and forth between 2D and 3D. So you have this nice toggle. So if you're shooting 2D pictures and all of a sudden you're like, I want to shoot a 3D picture, you can jump right in and do that. Volume rocker, 3.5mm headphone jack, power button up there at the top. And then over here you have your micro USB charging port. And you have a 1,730 milliamp hour battery in the back here. And then you have a 1,520 milliamp hour battery in the myTouch 4G slide. It's a little bit different in the battery department. HTC says that with the 3D capabilities, 1,720 or 730 rather, will be more than enough. You know, I've used this as a personal device and as a demo unit, and I've never made it through the day on a one charge with a 1,730 milliamp hour battery, and that's without using 3D. So it's not the greatest in the battery life department, but one thing I do like, you know, or a couple things rather, they've really improved on the design over the original EVO 4G. For example, you'll see that the battery cover wraps around the entire device now, as opposed to just the back like the EVO 4G. So it's a little bit sturdier, has a nice metal front, but this one looks great as well. You'll see, like I said, very similar to the myTouch 4G, but with the, of course, you know, very sturdy hinge for the sliding functionality for the keyboard. T-Mobile logo here in the back, and all in all, I think it looks good as well. This is kind of how the EVO 4G battery cover looked, except this one I find to be a lot sturdier than the EVO 4G's battery door. They do a pretty decent job, and it stays in place with few issues. So in terms of a design, you know, perspective, I feel like it's a little bit better in that department. But design-wise, looks good. Nice chrome around the edges, so you can see just a comparison of the designs. The EVO 3D is a little bit boxier, and of course it's bigger. And there's the myTouch, a little bit more rounded. Aesthetically, may appeal to more people just because of the way it looks. And it's also a very thin device to have a physical QWERTY keyboard. It's not that much thicker than the EVO 3D, so you can see the difference there. I'll try to see some of the difference. I'm not holding them side by side, but you get the idea. Both fit well in the hand, and this one is an improvement from its predecessor because it's a longer display. It's a 540 by 960 pixel display, so it's a little bit long and narrow, so it's easier to hold in the hand and grip while you're on the phone. So all in all, design-wise, you know, it's going to be personal preference. I prefer the design of the myTouch 4G slide a little bit more than the EVO 3D, but as always, up to you. If you want the bigger screen, then the EVO 3D is going to be your choice. Now, in terms of display quality, you know, again, I find the screen on the myTouch 4G slide to be a little bit clearer. The blacks are a little bit more black. QHD is certainly decent. You can see an improvement on this over other devices like the EVO 4G, some of the past devices that didn't have high-res screens. But you can just see, let me go into something like, let's see. Going into messaging, for example, you can see that the black is just a little bit clearer on the myTouch 4G slide. But you know, as always, it's going to be a personal thing. Let's go to messaging, take a look at that in comparison on both of these devices. You can see the interface here a little bit different. It's kind of preserved the old Sense look and feel here with 2.0, with the sliding thing down here at the bottom where you can move between messages, groups, and attachments. And then to do a new message, we can start those right up here. And then you get two different options. You get the Sense keyboard on both of these. Now, obviously, it's going to work a little bit better on a 4.3-inch display, just because you have, you know, a bigger screen real estate to work with. So we'll say the quick brown fox. Fox is happy and excited. And so you can see it in portrait and in landscape, and especially in landscape with that long 4.3-inch display. For somebody with big thumbs like myself, much easier to type on this device than on the EVO or on the myTouch 4G slide. Now, that said, it's not too bad on this one. We can say the quick brown fox is happy and excited. The wick brown dock is happy and excited. That looks interesting. So you can see that in portrait and in landscape. Again, 3.7-inch display, so a little harder to type, but at least, you know, you still have a decent screen real estate here to work with, and it's larger than the popular iPhone 4. So you're looking at 3.5 versus 3.7. So, you know, it's easy to work with on both of these. You get a couple of options over here. We'll go to input methods. You can see swipe and touch input, so you get swipe over here and you get it over here as well. So if swipe's your thing, you have that pre-installed on both of these devices. Now, to skip to browser quickly so we can do a browser test, and this one's running on Sprint's 3G right now. I'll show you there. Go ahead and load it up. And then this one's running on T-Mobile's 4G, which is HSPA+. Go to Phone Dog and wait for it to load right up. And I'll show you, you know, the physical keyboard, and I'll put it to the test a little bit later in the video. But the physical keyboard on this one. Not as good as the Droid 3 and some of the others on the market like the Epic 4G. I find the keys to not be as tactile as I'd like them to be. The space is a little bit funky, and the way they're curved is a little bit odd as well. Now that said, it's always good to have a physical keyboard, and to preserve the size. Considering this one has a physical keyboard, the size has been preserved very nicely. So you can see there are a few issues there, but not as tactile. The keys are a little harder to press, and I'm not sure why Phone Dog is timing out. Let's see here. Go to Phone Dog. Let me go up here and refresh just to make sure. Wait for it to load up, and then while it's loading up, we'll take a look at it on the EVO 3D. Now the page is fully loaded. You can see the pinch to zoom capabilities here are reasonably fast. I've seen faster on some Android devices, but that said, it's not too bad at all. Double tap in, double tap, or double tap out, double tap in rather. And you can see another thing I like about Sense-A-Lot, when you go to Windows, it shows a preview of where you left off. So if you open up a second tab, you want to load up CNN, for example, while Phone Dog's loading, go to Windows here, we'll add that. And then I can go back over here, and you can see it leaves me right where I left off, so I know where I was in the page. And if I zoom in, same thing. If I go down here, we'll go to the top logo, for example, and zoom in right there. And then I'll go to Windows, you can see right where I left off. So I know where I left off, I can scroll down from there and catch up on my reading or whatever it was that I was doing. Now over here, I have no idea why this one's not working. Let's try phonedog.com one more time. Okay, it finally loaded up for me, so you can see pinch to zoom pretty responsive on this one as well. Actually, I'd venture to say it's a little bit more responsive on the myTouch 4G Slide than it is on the EVO 3D. You can see double tap to zoom in, or zoom out rather, double tap to zoom in. Pretty easy to do, and it scrolls around relatively quickly. Now this one has the same window feature that I was talking about on the EVO 3D, where you open a second window, you go back to this one, and it preserves where you left off. So I know if I left off at buying from authorized dealers, I can scroll right down and continue reading from there. So same browser functionality, but in terms of overall performance, it goes to the myTouch 4G Slide. Now let's talk a little bit about the differences between the Sense builds. Now both of these are running Sense 3.0, but you'll see some changes across the board here. For example, the apps drawer down at the bottom, rather, you'll see on the myTouch 4G Slide is different than the Sense 3.0 version that's found in the EVO 3D. That's because this one's running a myTouch-centric version of Sense 3.0, whereas this is running kind of the full-on build, if you will, of Sense 3.0. Now you'll see some differences in the personalization department as well. Well, first of all, let's do this. Let's scroll through here so you can see how the app drawers look a little bit different. You can see that the phone and the home are still preserved when you're scrolling up and down through the app drawer here. You'll see the notification bars are about the same, with the ability to go to quick settings and turn on 4G, Wi-Fi hotspot, etc. Excuse me. And you can see down here frequent and downloaded on the Sprint build, or the Sense 3.0 build that's on the EVO 3D and on the Sensation 4G. Now where you'll see some additional differences are in the personalization menus on both of these. So we can go here and we'll go to personalize over here as well. Now you'll see some differences here, not only color differences, but you'll see things like the fact that skin, there's no option to change the skin on the myTouch 4G Slide. That's because you get a couple of themes out of the box, and themes to the myTouch are kind of like a combination between scene and skin on the EVO 3D. So you get some themes to choose from. You can change the colors a little bit, kind of change the way it looks, but you're stuck there. You don't get access to HTC Hub or anything like that to download new skins or new themes, excuse me, on the myTouch 4G Slide. Now over here you get scene, skin, wallpaper, and on skin you can change around the way it looks. You can change the colors from burgundy to blue sky to HTC, but you can get more through HTC Hub, which is HTC's kind of online resource to download wallpapers, ringtones, things like that. Now, you can come back out here and we'll show you. Let's go back out here to lock screen, for example. You'll see lock screen isn't on the myTouch 4G Slide. That's what I was talking about earlier. You can add things like photo albums, your friend stream, the weather, stocks, etc. So when you turn the device off and back on, the first thing you see is the weather or your stocks or whatever you have selected, along with some shortcuts down here. So if I happen to use the phone, Blockbuster a lot, for example, let's just say, I can bring it down into the ring and let go of it, and it loads up Blockbuster right away. I won't actually do that because it takes a little bit of time. But other than that, widget app shortcuts, all that stuff is exactly the same. And on both of these, on the widgets, you get HTC widgets and the stock Android widgets. So you can see the differences there. Now on the HTC widgets, you get, of course, let me pull it down here so you can see, month view, agenda view, and a small day view as well. So within the widgets, you get a lot of options from HTC. They really give you, they're all about customization. And in Sense 3.0, both on this build and on this build, you get a lot of options to do so.